The music swelled softly through the golden, lit hall, and I felt my heart pounding beneath layers of lace and satin. It was our wedding day, the day I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. The scent of roses and vanilla candles floated through the air, blending with the laughter and chatter of our guests. Every face I saw was beaming family, friends, people who had watched Daniel and me grow together over the past 5 years. When I looked at Daniel, standing across from me in his charcoal suit and crisp white shirt, I felt the world melt away. He looked breathtakingly calm, confident, the faint smile on his lips one I had fallen in love with countless times before. His eyes caught mine, and for a moment everything felt perfect, like we were the only two people in the room. As the band began to play our song, Daniel extended his hand to me. "Ready, Mrs. Hayes?" he teased softly. My heart fluttered at the way he said it, "Mrs. Hayes." I'd waited so long to hear that. I laughed and nodded, always. He pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine, and we began to move in rhythm to the gentle melody. It was an old love song, his choice, the same one we danced to in the kitchen on the night he proposed. My cheek rested against his shoulder, and I felt his heart beating under the fabric of his jacket, steady and strong. For those first few seconds, it felt like the universe had aligned just for us. Every step, every turn, every shared look seemed to whisper forever. But then, as the music dipped to a quiet lull, Daniel's body tensed slightly. I didn't think much of it at first. He cleared his throat and smiled toward the band, then gently stopped our movement. The crowd applauded lightly, thinking maybe he was about to make one of his famously charming speeches. He took the microphone from the band's lead singer, his voice warm but trembling slightly. I remember smiling at him, expecting something sweet, maybe a story about how we met or a joke about my obsession with wedding planning. But the words that came next would haunt me forever. "This dance," Daniel began, his voice thick with emotion, "is for the woman I've loved for 10 years. The room went silent. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible, choking, impossible to ignore. My smile faltered instantly, confusion rippling through me. 10 years, I blinked, trying to process. We had only known each other for 5. Around us, whispers began. I saw my mother's hand freeze halfway to her champagne glass, my father's brows knit together. My best friend, Leela, shot me a look of pure bewilderment from the bridesmaids' table. I waited for Daniel to clarify, to laugh it off, to say something that made sense. Maybe he was being poetic, maybe he meant he'd waited his whole life to find me. But as my eyes searched his face, I saw something that made my stomach twist. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere else at the back of the room. Slowly, instinctively, I followed it. There, sitting alone at a round table near the exit, was a woman in a silver dress. She was beautiful in a haunting kind of way, tall, poised, with dark hair cascading over one shoulder and eyes that glistened under the dim light. She didn't smile, she didn't move, but there was something in the way Daniel looked at her, something raw and unspoken, that made my heart drop into my stomach. Every ounce of warmth drained from my body. My hands felt cold, my chest tight. The guests began to murmur louder now, turning their heads between Daniel and the mysterious woman, as if trying to piece together a puzzle that I didn't even know existed. I forced a shaky laugh, desperate to break the tension. "Oh, come on, Daniel," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my best effort. "You mean me, right?" He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and in that split second, I saw panic flash across his eyes. He smiled awkwardly, but it was too late. His silence had already said more than any words could. Of course," he stammered, attempting to recover, but his voice lacked conviction. I meant, this dance is for the woman who taught me what love really means." But his eyes flickered toward the silver, dressed woman again, and my world began to crumble piece by piece. The band, clearly confused, started playing again to fill the uncomfortable pause. Daniel stepped closer to me and took my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My fingers were stiff, my eyes locked on his face, searching for truth. "Dance with me," he whispered as if begging. I stared at him for a long moment before forcing a smile for the sake of the guests, the photographers, the family, the hundreds of eyes watching us. My body moved, but my mind was elsewhere. Every word he had just said echoed in my head. The woman I've loved for 10 years, who was she? I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe this woman was someone from his past, a friend, a relative. But the way he'd said it, the tone, the look, it wasn't platonic. It was intimate, painfully intimate. As we swayed, I caught glimpses of her again. The woman in silver never took her eyes off us. Her face remained unreadable, but her fingers were curled tightly around the stem of her wine glass. When Daniel spun me around, I saw her blink rapidly, as if holding back tears. I swallowed hard, trying not to fall apart in front of everyone. My wedding, our wedding, was turning into something else entirely. When the song ended, applause broke out again, but it sounded distant, hollow. Daniel kissed my forehead, and I forced another smile, pretending everything was fine. The photographer captured the moment, a picture that would later haunt me when I looked back and saw the tension hidden behind my grin. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the image of that woman. She didn't leave. She mingled quietly, speaking to a few people I didn't recognize. Once I saw Daniel's brother approach her, his expression tense, and they exchanged a few hushed words. Finally, during dinner, I leaned over to Daniel and asked quietly, "Who is she?" He froze for a moment, then replied too quickly, "Just an old friend, don't worry about it." But I did worry. Every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong. Later that night, while everyone was laughing and dancing, I excused myself to get some air. I stood in the garden outside the hall, the cool night breeze brushing against my bare shoulders. I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to make sense of what had just happened. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there she was, the woman in the silver dress. Up close, she was even more striking and strangely familiar, though I couldn't place why. She looked at me with a kind of quiet sorrow that made my throat tighten. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Her voice trembled, and for a moment I could see the tears she was fighting to hold back. "For what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "For being here," she whispered. "I shouldn't have come." I stared at her, confusion and anger swirling inside me. "Who are you?" She hesitated, glancing toward the ballroom where Daniel was laughing with his friends, pretending everything was fine. "Someone he should have let go a long time ago," she said finally, "but he didn't." The world tilted, my stomach twisted, my voice came out barely above a whisper. "You mean, you and him?" She nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "It ended years ago, or at least I thought it did, but when he sent me an invitation, I couldn't stay away. I guess I wanted to see if he'd really moved on." My heart pounded in my chest, and has he? She looked at me for a long, painful moment before whispering, "I don't think so." Then she turned and walked away, her silver dress glimmering under the moonlight until she disappeared into the dark. I stood frozen, my world unraveling around me. Inside, laughter and music filled the air, but all I could hear was the echo of Daniel's voice from earlier. "This dance is for the woman I've loved for 10 years, and for the first time that night I realized that maybe that woman wasn't me. The morning after our wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I woke up to an unfamiliar silence. The sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains felt too bright, too harsh, as if the world was mocking me for pretending everything was fine. Daniel lay beside me, his hand draped lazily across my waist, sleeping peacefully. For a moment I stared at him, wondering how someone could look so calm when my heart felt like it had been shattered into pieces. The events from the night before kept replaying in my head, the speech, his eyes on that woman, the words, "the woman I've loved for 10 years." I could still hear the whispers of our guests, still feel the burning humiliation on my cheeks as everyone pretended not to notice the tension between us. And then that woman's confession in the garden. Those quiet, devastating words that had changed everything. I slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him. My wedding dress was still hanging from the wardrobe, the hem slightly stained from the dance floor. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering how happy I had been just 24 hours earlier. I had thought that dress would symbolize the start of forever, but now it just looked like a costume from a dream that had ended too soon. When Daniel finally stirred, he smiled sleepily and reached for me. "Morning, Mrs. Hayes," he said softly. The sound of it, "Mrs. Hayes," made my stomach twist. "Morning," I replied quietly, keeping my voice neutral. He sat up and stretched, running his hands through his hair. "Yesterday was perfect, wasn't it?" Perfect. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could say that after what he'd done, but I held it in. I needed answers, not another scene, so I turned to him, my hands trembling slightly. "Daniel," I began carefully, "who was that woman?" For a moment his expression went blank, too blank. Then, too casually, he replied, "Just an old friend from college. You don't need to worry about her." "She said you were together," I said, watching his reaction closely. He froze. It was subtle, but I saw it, a flicker in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. Then he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, yes," he admitted quietly. "We dated, a long time ago." "How long?" I pressed. He hesitated. "About 7 years." My heart dropped. 7 years, and you said you've loved her for 10. He looked at me then, his face full of guilt. "It's not what you think, Anna. It ended long before I met you. We were young. It wasn't real." "Then why did you look at her like that?" My voice cracked despite me trying to stay composed. "Why did you dedicate our wedding dance to her?" He ran a hand through his hair again, frustrated. "I didn't mean it like that. I got nervous. I didn't even think about what I was saying. I was trying to thank her. She helped me become who I am. You know how speeches go. Sometimes the words just come out wrong." I stared at him in disbelief. "You called her the woman you've loved for 10 years, Daniel. That's not a slip of the tongue. That's a confession." He didn't respond. He just looked away, his jaw clenched tight. That silence was louder than any answer he could have given me. I stood up, wrapping my arms around myself. "I can't do this right now." He reached for me, panic in his eyes. "Anna, please, no." I cut him off, stepping back. "I need to think. I need space." I left the room before he could say anything else. My heels clicked against the marble hallway, echoing in rhythm with my heartbeat. By the time I reached the lobby, tears had already started to sting my eyes. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. I spent that day walking aimlessly through the small coastal town where we'd booked our honeymoon suite. The ocean breeze was cold, the waves crashing violently against the shore like the storm raging inside me. How could I have missed it? The signs, the hesitation in his eyes, the small silences whenever I asked about his past. I had thought it was just privacy, not secrets. That night, I stayed in a different room. Daniel called me multiple times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I needed to hear the truth, all of it, and I knew he wasn't ready to give it. 2 days later, when I finally returned home, I found him waiting at the door with flowers and an apology rehearsed on his lips. "Anna, please, let's talk," he begged. I let him in, though my heart felt heavy. We sat in silence for a long time before he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're right, I should have told you about her. Her name is Emily. We were together for 7 years from college until my mid-20s. I thought she was the one, but it ended because she cheated on me. It broke me for a long time." I crossed my arms, my voice steady. "And you're still in love with her?" He shook his head. "No. I thought I'd moved on. When I met you, you gave me hope again. But seeing her at the wedding, I didn't expect her to show up. It just threw me off. I panicked, and the wrong words came out. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to the version of Daniel. I loved the man who stayed up late helping me study, who cooked me breakfast every Sunday, who cried when he proposed because he said he couldn't imagine a life without me. But deep down, a voice whispered that something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, I tried to move forward. I told myself that everyone makes mistakes, that maybe it really was just a slip of the tongue. Daniel became overly attentive, showering me with affection, cooking dinner, leaving love notes, planning little surprises. On the surface, everything seemed normal again. But one evening, while he was in the shower, I found something that shattered what little trust I had left. His phone buzzed with a message. Normally, I never went through his things, I wasn't that kind of person. But after everything, my instincts were screaming at me to look. The message preview read, "I shouldn't have come that night, but seeing you again, I can't stop thinking about it." My blood ran cold. The sender's name, Emily. I opened the conversation. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. There weren't many, but enough. He had messaged her a few days after the wedding. Apologies, nostalgic words, confessions he had no business making. He wrote, "I'll always care about you. You were my first everything." I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me. I put the phone down and walked out of the house before he could even notice. That night, I stayed with my best friend Leela. When I told her everything, she looked furious. "Anna, he's manipulating you," she said firmly. "He doesn't deserve your kindness or your patience." I wanted to deny it, to defend him, but the truth was right there in those messages. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal, emotional, maybe even deeper than physical. A few days later, Daniel showed up at Leela's doorstep. His eyes were red, his expression desperate. "Please, Anna, listen to me. It was nothing. I just needed closure. I didn't mean to hurt you." I crossed my arms. "You had closure the day you asked me to marry you. You made vows to me, not to her. But the first chance you got, you broke them." He shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. "I love you, Anna. I swear I do." "Do you?" I whispered. "Because I think part of you is still dancing with her." That broke him. He sank to his knees, crying, begging for forgiveness, and maybe once I would have given it to him. But standing there, watching the man who had humiliated me on the most sacred day of our lives, I realized something. I deserved better. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You need to leave." He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "Goodbye, Daniel." It took months for me to heal. I moved into my own apartment, went back to work, and started therapy. The first few weeks were hard. Every morning I woke up expecting him beside me. But slowly, the silence became peaceful instead of painful. One evening, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. I opened it carefully. It was from Emily. "I don't expect forgiveness." It read, "I wanted you to know that I left the country. Daniel tried to contact me, but I told him not to. He's confused, not cruel. I hope you find peace even if he never does." I folded the letter and tucked it away. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just relief. A year later, I attended a friend's wedding. As the bride and groom shared their first dance, I felt something loosen inside me. The song was soft and beautiful, and I realized that maybe someday I'd dance again, not as a woman betrayed, but as a woman who survived, because love isn't just about finding the right person. Sometimes it's about walking away from the wrong one, even if you once believed he was your forever. And as the music played, I smiled for the first time in months, whispering to myself, "This dance is for me."